The night was cold but bright with orange lanterns swinging above the long driveway of the Hollywood mansion. The Halloween charity gala had become one of the most awaited nights of the year, where stars, directors, and guests came together to raise funds for children's hospitals. Laughter echoed through the grand hall as music blended with the sounds of footsteps, clinking glasses, and faint thunder rolling outside. Keanu Reeves arrived quietly as always, dressed in a simple night costume, polished but modest. He never liked attention, yet wherever he went, eyes followed. Sandra Bullock entered moments later, dressed as an angel with soft white feathers on her shoulders, glowing under the golden lights. When she saw Keanu waiting near the staircase, her smile grew wide. She said softly, "You're really keeping the theme of silent protector, aren't you?" He chuckled and replied, "Someone has to keep the peace among ghosts and vampires." As they walked together through the hall, cameras flashed, but neither seemed to notice. They were used to attention, yet tonight felt different. The event was not about fame or glamour. It was about kindness. Every ticket sold, every mask worn, every painting auctioned meant new hospital beds for sick children. Keanu had personally matched the donations in secret, but no one knew. He never wanted credit for helping others. The hall was alive with costumes and colors. Famous actors dressed as pharaohs, kings, and clowns filled the room. The air carried a strange mix of perfume and candle wax. From the tall windows, flashes of lightning revealed the dark sky outside. Organizers announced that a surprise challenge would take place later in the night, a haunted maze built inside the old west wing of the mansion. It was meant for fun and charity, but Keanu felt something uneasy about the tone. He noticed the old chandeliers hanging from the cracked ceiling of that section when he walked through earlier. Something about them didn't seem stable. Still, he smiled when Sandra said she wanted to join the maze. She was fearless, playful, and curious. Her laughter often filled the quiet moments Keanu tried to hide in. Together, they agreed to take part in the challenge. Around them, guests cheered as thunder rumbled louder. The event lights flickered once, then steadied again. As the party continued, an organizer named Daniel nervously adjusted his headset near the control booth. He was young, only in his 20s, hired as a lighting assistant. He had been told to make the maze feel alive with effects, sounds, and surprises. He had spent weeks preparing, tightening screws, adjusting props, and programming fake scares. But one of his adjustments that morning had gone wrong. He had loosened the chain of one chandelier to attach a fake ghost, promising himself he would secure it again later. But in the rush of setup, he forgot. Now, as laughter filled the hall, the same chandelier swayed gently above the dark hallway, the loose link rattling with every tremor of thunder. Inside the main room, Keanu spoke to a small group of fans who had been invited through charity tickets. He asked about their dreams and listened with real interest. Sandra watched him with admiration. She knew his quiet nature wasn't shyness. It was depth. He believed listening was the highest form of respect. She often said, "You never talk to be heard, Keanu. You talk to make someone feel seen." He smiled and shrugged, replying, "That's the only reason to talk at all." As the clock struck 10, the host announced through a microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our Haunted Maze Challenge. Each team will enter the West Wing. Whoever finds the hidden lantern first unlocks a secret donation worth $50,000 for the children's hospital." The audience clapped. Sandra squeezed Keanu's arm with excitement. "Come on, let's make the kids win tonight," she said, pulling him along. He followed, his calm eyes scanning the flickering lights as they moved toward the corridor. Inside the maze, candles glowed dimly. Fake cobwebs covered mirrors, and eerie sounds played through hidden speakers. People laughed, screamed playfully, and ran from sudden jump scares. Sandra laughed too, teasing Keanu for not reacting. He said quietly, "It's hard to scare someone who's already seen the world." She stopped walking for a moment and looked at him curiously. "And what did you see, Silent Night?" she asked. He smiled faintly, enough to know that kindness is the only thing that lasts. They continued walking through the hallway as thunder cracked again. A strong wind from the open window made the candles flicker wildly. The air felt heavier now. Sandra looked up at the chandelier above them, shimmering with fake crystals. It swayed slightly. She didn't notice the tiny sound of metal bending, but Keanu did. His instincts sharpened. Something didn't feel right. In the control booth, Daniel froze as he noticed the chandelier's chain move strangely on his monitor. He turned pale. He reached for his headset to warn someone, but his voice trembled. "Stop the maze lights," he whispered to the technician beside him. But it was too late. The next second, the wire snapped with a sharp metallic crack that echoed through the hall. In one instant, Keanu's body moved before thought. He grabbed Sandra by her shoulders and pushed her away from the center of the corridor. Glass and metal crashed behind them, scattering across the floor with a loud roar. Screams filled the hall. People rushed back as shards flew through the air. Keanu shielded Sandra with his arm as dust and smoke rose around them. The chandelier lay shattered, inches from where they had stood. Sandra gasped, trying to understand what just happened. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She turned and saw Keanu bleeding slightly from his arm, small cuts from flying glass. His face stayed calm, his voice low. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, unable to speak for a moment. "You saved me," she whispered softly. He smiled faintly. "You would have done the same." Panic spread through the crowd. The host shouted for everyone to exit the maze. Some thought it was part of the act until they saw real blood on Keanu's sleeve. Sandra helped him to a seat near the exit while paramedics were called. The lights flickered again, then went out completely. Only the lightning outside lit the mansion's walls. In the corner, Daniel stood frozen, his headset still buzzing. Guilt struck him like a knife. He knew what he had forgotten. He wanted to confess, but fear stopped his voice. He imagined losing his job, his dream, his respect. Yet as he looked toward the chaos, he saw Keanu sitting calmly, helping others before himself. Something about that moment changed him inside. As guests whispered and the storm grew louder, Sandra sat beside Keanu, holding his hand gently. She could see the pain in his arm, yet he smiled. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You should get this treated." He looked at her and said, "If we leave now, others will panic more. Let's wait until everyone's safe first." The minutes passed in confusion, but the scene had already carved itself into everyone's hearts. The movie star known for humility had just proven his reputation wasn't an image. He had acted faster than security, faster than fear itself. The news crews outside were unaware of what just happened inside the mansion, but soon they would learn about the act that turned a Halloween party into a story of real heroism. As the storm eased for a moment, Sandra looked at Keanu and said, "Why do you always put others before yourself?" He replied, "Because someone once did the same for me." She wanted to ask who, but his eyes were distant, filled with quiet memory. It wasn't pride. It was gratitude. No one yet knew that the young technician trembling in the corner was the same person who had nearly caused the accident. And no one knew that Keanu already recognized him from somewhere long before tonight. The night was far from over. Behind the broken glass and flickering lights, a deeper story of kindness was about to unfold. The storm outside continued to rumble, shaking the tall windows as the paramedics entered the mansion. Flashes of light from their kits reflected off the shattered crystals scattered across the floor. Guests whispered nervously, their laughter replaced by uneasy silence. The Halloween gala that had begun with joy now felt heavy with confusion and shock. Keanu sat quietly on a marble bench near the hall's exit. Sandra stayed beside him, holding a clean towel against the shallow cut on his arm. The medics offered to take him to a nearby clinic, but he refused gently. "Help the others first," he said calmly. "I'm fine." Even now, his focus stayed on those around him. It wasn't false modesty. It was instinct. The host tried to calm the crowd with a microphone, but the speakers crackled and his voice echoed awkwardly. "Please remain seated, everyone." It seems there was a structural issue in the West Wing. The situation is under control, yet his trembling hands told a different story. People whispered that the chandelier nearly killed 2 Hollywood stars. Some took pictures while others prayed silently. Sandra looked at Keanu, noticing how still he was. His breathing steady, eyes sharp, watching everyone around him like he was making sure no one else was hurt. In the shadows near the technical booth, Daniel, the young lighting assistant, stood frozen. His heart pounded fast, each beat reminding him of his mistake. He replayed the moment again and again. The forgotten chain, the fake ghost prop, the loosened link. It was his fault. If Keanu hadn't acted in time, Sandra might have been badly hurt or worse. His palms were cold and his throat burned with guilt. He wanted to confess, but fear tied him to the floor. He had always admired Keanu, read stories of his kindness and simplicity. Now the same man had risked himself to save another, because of Daniel's negligence. Sandra looked up when she saw Keanu suddenly stand. "Where are you going?" she asked quietly. He looked toward the back of the hall. "Someone's hiding over there," he said softly. "He hasn't moved since the fall." Sandra turned to look, noticing a figure in a black staff jacket half hidden behind a control table. "Maybe he's hurt," she whispered. Keanu nodded and began walking slowly toward him. The young man's legs almost gave way when Keanu approached. Daniel's eyes were wide, his lips trembling. "I'm so sorry," he said before Keanu could even speak. "I didn't mean to." "I forgot to fix the chain. I was supposed to tighten it after setting the prop, but I didn't. It was my fault." His voice broke as he looked down, unable to meet Keanu's gaze. "Please, sir, I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Sandra stepped closer, but Keanu lifted his hand gently to stop her from speaking. His face was calm, his tone low and steady. "You made a mistake," he said, "and you came forward to admit it. That takes courage." Daniel looked up, confused. "But I almost killed someone," he said, his voice shaking. Keanu looked around at the guests, at the medics, at Sandra, then back at Daniel. "No," he said softly. "You reminded everyone here that life is fragile, that we can't take carelessness lightly. You didn't mean harm, but now you have a chance to make things right." The room grew silent. Even the whispers stopped. Sandra watched him in awe. There was no anger in his voice, no blame, only calm understanding. Daniel tried to speak again, but words wouldn't come. Tears filled his eyes as he said, "I'll accept whatever happens. I just wanted to make the maze perfect. I thought it would make the guests happy." Keanu nodded slowly. "And it still can," he said. "You can still make tonight about helping others." The event manager, a tall man named Mr. Harris, rushed over after hearing the confession. His face was red with anger. "You could have killed someone," he shouted. "You're fired, do you hear me?" "You're finished." The guests turned to watch the confrontation. Sandra frowned, sensing the growing tension. Daniel lowered his head, accepting the words without argument. He knew he deserved it. But Keanu stepped between them and spoke quietly. "Not tonight." The manager blinked in surprise. "What do you mean, not tonight?" "This boy," Keanu interrupted softly but firmly. "This boy made a mistake, and he's already punished himself enough. Tonight is about charity and kindness, not punishment. If we turn this into blame, what lesson do we teach?" His words carried more weight than volume. Even the thunder outside seemed to fade for a moment. The crowd listened silently as he continued. "Give him a chance to help fix the damage instead. Let him repair what he broke, not just lose what he loves." Mr. Harris hesitated, unsure how to respond. His anger met the calm force of Keanu's tone and slowly melted into silence. Finally, he sighed. "Fine," he said. "He stays for the night. But tomorrow we'll review this properly." Keanu nodded. "That's fair." He turned to Daniel and said, "You'll help them clean this up. Start by making sure no one gets near the broken glass." Daniel nodded quickly, tears falling freely now. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. As the cleanup began, Sandra walked beside Keanu and said softly, "You could have let him go. No one would blame you." Keanu looked at her, his eyes gentle. "I don't believe in throwing people away for their mistakes," he said. "Someone once forgave mine when I didn't deserve it." She wanted to ask what he meant, but he only smiled and looked back toward Daniel, who was helping the staff pick up shards of glass carefully, his hands trembling but determined. The storm eased outside and the power slowly returned. Soft golden lights filled the hall again, but the air felt changed. Something real had entered the room, the quiet presence of humility and reflection. Guests began to sit again, whispering about what they had just seen. Some even clapped quietly, not for the drama, but for the kindness that had followed it. As the night continued, Sandra insisted Keanu rest. He finally allowed the medic to clean his wound. The cut wasn't deep, but his arm was sore. She joked gently. Even knights need first aid. He smiled. It's part of the costume. She laughed softly, but then turned serious. You could have been badly hurt, she said. You didn't even think twice. Keanu replied. There wasn't time to think. When you care about someone, your heart moves before your head. His words made her pause. She looked down, pretending to adjust her dress to hide the warmth rising in her cheeks. The lightning flashed again outside, and for a moment she saw her reflection in his eyes, calm, kind, and brave. She realized how deeply she respected him, not for his fame, but for his humanity. Later, the host returned to the stage and announced that the haunted maze would be closed for safety reasons, but the fundraiser would continue. Keanu and Sandra stayed in the audience, their quiet presence grounding the nervous crowd. Mr. Harris, now calmer, approached Keanu during a break. You handled that better than I did, he admitted. I was too angry to see clearly. Keanu smiled gently. Anger hides understanding. It's easy to lose balance when fear walks in first. The manager nodded and looked toward Daniel, who was sweeping the last of the glass pieces. He's young, Harris said. Maybe he deserves another chance. Keanu said, he does. Kindness isn't weakness, it's strength with patience. As the music resumed, Sandra leaned closer and said, You turned a disaster into a lesson. Keanu replied quietly, It wasn't me, it was the moment. It reminded everyone that kindness can still stand even when everything else falls. She smiled at the words. You should write that down, she said. He shook his head. Some words are meant to be lived, not written. Meanwhile, Daniel kept working until his knees ached. One of the older staff members brought him water and said, You're lucky that man was there. Anyone else would have had you arrested. Daniel nodded. I know, he said softly. I don't understand why he helped me. The older man smiled. Because that's who he is. Some people build their strength by lifting others, not themselves. When the hall finally cleared near midnight, Keanu stood at the entrance watching the last guests leave. Sandra joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. You think the boy will be all right? She asked. Keanu replied, He will if he learns from this. Everyone deserves a chance to rise from their mistakes. Sandra looked up at the flickering lanterns outside. You always see light where others see shadows, she said. Keanu smiled. Maybe that's what Halloween is really about. Not fear, but finding the light behind the mask. The night seemed to calm after that, but deep inside the mansion, another secret waited to unfold. Daniel wasn't just a careless technician. There was something more about him, something Keanu already knew but hadn't revealed yet. The truth was quietly waiting for its turn to step into the light. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, tapping gently against the tall windows of the mansion. The Halloween party was ending, but its memory hung in the air like the faint echo of thunder. Most guests had already left, whispering about Keanu's bravery and the strange twist that had turned a night of costumes into a lesson on real courage. The last few lights flickered softly above the marble floor where the broken chandelier had once crashed. Keanu stayed behind with Sandra, helping the event crew pack up decorations. Even though the organizers insisted he should rest, he quietly refused. I'm already standing, he said with a small smile. Might as well help others stand too. Sandra shook her head, half amused and half in awe. You never stop, do you? She asked. He looked at her and said, You don't stop kindness once it starts. Meanwhile, at the far end of the hall, Daniel swept the last few glass shards into a bucket. His face was pale, his hands red from work. The older staff members were kind to him, but his guilt still weighed heavy. Every time his broom brushed the floor, he saw flashes of what could have happened. The chandelier falling, Sandra screaming, Keanu leaping. His chest tightened each time. When Keanu noticed him, he quietly walked over. Sandra followed, curious but silent. Daniel looked up when Keanu's shadow fell beside him. He stood quickly, his voice shaky. Sir, I didn't think you'd still be here, he said. Keanu smiled softly. You're still working, so why shouldn't I be? Daniel blinked, confused by his calmness. But you were hurt because of me, he said, voice trembling. You should hate me. Keanu placed the broom gently against the wall and said, If I hated everyone who made a mistake, I'd spend my life angry. I don't want that. Daniel's eyes filled with tears again. I'll never forgive myself for what happened. Keanu looked at him quietly and said, Then forgive others first. It'll teach you how. Sandra stepped closer, sensing the heaviness between them. He means that learning compassion starts with understanding pain, she said softly. Daniel nodded, wiping his face. I just wanted to do something special tonight, he whispered. I wanted to make the maze amazing, make people smile. I never thought it would turn into this. Keanu's expression softened even more. What made you care so much about this event? He asked. Daniel hesitated for a long time before speaking. Because this charity helped my sister once, he said quietly. She was born with a heart condition. The hospital this fundraiser supports, it saved her life. I couldn't donate money, so I volunteered here. I thought maybe I could give something back. Sandra gasped softly, her heart tightening at his words. Keanu's eyes glimmered with understanding. Your heart was in the right place, he said. Sometimes good intentions get tangled in small mistakes. That doesn't make the heart behind them less pure. The young man looked down, his voice breaking. You don't understand, sir. I shouldn't even be here tonight. I was almost fired last year for overworking and breaking lights. I just wanted to prove that I could make something beautiful. Keanu looked at him with quiet recognition. Something about those words struck a familiar chord in him. A memory stirred. Years ago, on a film set in Los Angeles, a young intern had tried to fix a broken spotlight late at night. The light exploded and the crew blamed him. Keanu had been there that night too. He had stepped in to stop the boy from being fired and had later funded his education anonymously. He looked at Daniel closely now, noticing the same anxious eyes, the same scar near his temple. The realization hit him like soft lightning. This was the same boy, the same intern who had once cried behind a film trailer while Keanu promised him, One day, you'll light the world the right way. Sandra noticed the change in Keanu's expression. What is it? She asked quietly. Keanu took a slow breath, his eyes still fixed on Daniel. I know you, he said softly. Daniel looked confused. What do you mean? Keanu replied, Years ago on a movie set, a young intern broke a light trying to help. Everyone yelled at him. I told him mistakes are just lessons in disguise. Daniel froze, the color draining from his face. That was you? He whispered. Keanu nodded slowly. You disappeared after that night. I didn't think I'd see you again. Daniel's knees almost gave way as he realized the truth. He had never forgotten that night. The quiet actor who had defended him, the man who had told him not to give up. That moment had changed his life. Sandra's eyes widened as she looked between them. So you helped him before too? Keanu smiled faintly. Sometimes the world brings people back to remind them of unfinished kindness. Daniel broke down completely, covering his face with his hands. I thought I failed you again, he said. Keanu gently placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't fail me, he said. You reminded me why we help in the first place. The room grew silent except for the soft sound of rain outside. Sandra felt her heart ache at the sight. There was no judgment in Keanu's face, only compassion. She thought about how rare it was to see someone treat mistakes as moments to heal rather than to punish. Keanu then turned toward Mr. Harris, who had come back with the repair crew. Keep him, Keanu said quietly. Train him properly, give him better tools, let him learn safely. The manager hesitated. After tonight? He said. Keanu nodded. Yes, after tonight. We can't erase what happened, but we can change what comes next. Sandra stepped forward and added, I'll personally donate for the repairs. And maybe, she looked at Daniel, you can design the next event too, the right way this time. Daniel looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. You trust me again? He asked softly. Keanu smiled. Trust isn't about being perfect. It's about standing back up. The cleanup team began to leave as the hall emptied. Only Keanu, Sandra, and Daniel remained near the broken chandelier. The faint light from the hallway reflected on the shards like tiny stars on the floor. Keanu looked at them and said softly, Even broken pieces can still reflect light. Daniel whispered, "Thank you, sir." Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank the chance life gave you tonight. Not everyone gets a second one." Sandra smiled quietly at those words. She could feel the weight of the moment, the mix of pain and grace that defined true humanity. She said softly, "You turned a night of fear into something beautiful." Keanu replied, "It wasn't fear. It was a reminder." As they left the mansion together, the rain had stopped completely. The air was cool and clean, and the clouds began to part, revealing a faint glow of the moon. Sandra walked beside Keanu, her heels echoing lightly against the pavement. "You never told me about that story," she said. "The intern you helped before." He looked ahead and smiled. "I didn't think it mattered anymore," he said. "But maybe it was waiting to matter again." She looked at him quietly, realizing how deep his kindness ran. "You know," she said softly, "most people wear masks on Halloween to hide who they are. You wear one to protect who others are." Keanu laughed gently. "Then I guess I chose the right costume." As they reached the car, Sandra looked back at the mansion, now quiet under the moonlight. She felt something shift inside her, a sense that real heroism wasn't found in the movies or the lights, but in the quiet choices made when no one was watching. Keanu looked at her and said, "Tonight started dark, but it ended the way light always wins," silently. And somewhere inside the hall, Daniel stayed behind one last time, picking up the final piece of glass. Holding it in his hand as it caught the moonlight, he whispered to himself, "Even broken lights can shine again." The night that had begun with laughter and fear was ending in forgiveness and hope. None of them knew that what happened tonight would soon reach the world, inspiring millions who would learn that kindness could shine brightest after the darkest fall. The next morning, the mansion was quiet again. Only a few staff members remained, clearing decorations and folding tables. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and bright. The Halloween banners fluttered gently in the morning wind, and the sky looked peaceful, as if nothing tragic had ever happened. Sandra arrived early, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She found Keanu sitting alone near the broken chandelier that had been placed aside for repair. He was looking at it thoughtfully, as though it still had something to say. She handed him a cup and smiled. "Thinking about last night?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Some nights don't end when morning comes," he said. "They stay to teach you something." They sat in silence for a while. Workers swept the floor where fear had ruled only hours ago. Sandra finally spoke. "You changed that boy's life, you know," she said softly. "He'll never forget what you did." Keanu shook his head. "Maybe," he said, "but it's not about remembering me. It's about remembering what kindness looks like when it's hardest to give." Meanwhile, Daniel entered the hall nervously, holding a small box of tools. His eyes widened when he saw Keanu and Sandra waiting there. "I thought you'd both be gone," he said quietly. Keanu smiled. "I wanted to see the light fixed before leaving." Daniel looked down at the chandelier's shattered pieces. "I'll do it right this time," he said. "Every screw, every link." As Daniel began his careful work, Sandra watched him with quiet pride. She whispered to Keanu, "People think strength is loud, but last night proved it can be silent too." Keanu replied, "The strongest hearts don't shout, they act." When Daniel finished reattaching the last crystal, the sunlight hit it perfectly. The room filled with soft, colorful reflections dancing on the walls. For a moment, it looked like the hall was alive again. Sandra smiled. "You did it," she said. Daniel looked at the light shimmering around them and whispered, "No, we did." Keanu placed a small envelope on the table beside Daniel's tools. "What's this?" Daniel asked. Keanu said, "A scholarship fund. Not charity. A beginning. Keep learning. Use your light well." Daniel's voice cracked. "Sir, I don't deserve this." Keanu smiled gently. "That's the beauty of kindness. No one has to deserve it." As they stepped outside into the bright morning, Sandra looked at Keanu and said, You know, people will talk about what you did last night for years. He shook his head. Let them talk about forgiveness instead, he said. That's what really saved everyone. The story of the chandelier spread quickly. Headlines across the internet called it the Halloween night of real heroes. But for those who were there, it wasn't just about Keanu's bravery or Sandra's grace. It was about one small act of understanding that turned fear into light. And as they walked away from the mansion, Sandra said softly, "Last night started dark." Keanu finished her sentence quietly and ended with kindness. The news broke quietly at first, then spread everywhere within hours. Reporters posted clips of the Halloween gala, showing the moment after the chandelier fell. Though no full video existed, witnesses shared the same story. Keanu Reeves had risked himself to save Sandra Bullock. The headlines called him a hero, but he stayed silent, avoiding interviews and cameras. Sandra, on the other hand, was invited to several talk shows. She spoke gently about the night, never making it sound like drama. It wasn't about fear, she said softly on one show. It was about what someone does when fear shows up. Her words touched people deeply. Millions of viewers commented, saying that kindness still existed in Hollywood and that courage could still be quiet. Meanwhile, Daniel's life changed overnight. When the story reached the press, some outlets discovered his connection to the incident. People expected him to be blamed, but instead they learned what Keanu and Sandra had done, protecting him from losing everything, forgiving him, and even helping him start again. A photo surfaced online showing Daniel fixing the chandelier beside Keanu the next morning. It went viral, captioned with the words, "Even broken lights can shine again." Inside his small apartment, Daniel sat staring at his old phone as messages flooded in from strangers around the world. One read, "You gave me hope to start over." Another said, "Your story reminded me not to quit after failing." He couldn't stop crying as he realized that one night of fear had somehow turned into a lesson for thousands. Sandra called Keanu when she saw the news spreading. "They're calling you the Night of Kindness," she teased. He sighed quietly. "I just reacted," he said. "Anyone would have." She laughed softly. "No, Keanu. Not everyone would have risked their life for someone else." There was a pause before she added, "And not everyone would forgive the person who caused it." He smiled faintly on the other end of the line. "Forgiveness is easier than carrying anger," he said. "Anger burns you, but kindness rebuilds you." Sandra's eyes softened. "You know," she said, "the world needed this story, not for fame, but for faith." Days later, the charity organizers announced something unexpected. The donations from the Halloween event had doubled after the incident went public. People from around the world sent funds to support the children's hospital. Messages poured in, thanking the event for reminding humanity that compassion mattered more than fear. Mr. Harris, the manager, invited Daniel to the hospital's press event. He hesitated at first, afraid of facing the cameras, but Keanu insisted. "Stand there and tell your truth," he said. "Not to defend yourself, but to inspire someone else." On the day of the event, the hospital's auditorium was full of people. Sandra and Keanu sat quietly in the back, letting Daniel have the spotlight. When his turn came, he walked to the stage, nervous but steady. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I made a mistake," he began honestly, "a mistake that could have hurt someone. But instead of being punished, I was forgiven. That forgiveness didn't make me smaller. It made me want to be better. Because when someone sees light in you, even when you can't, you start to believe it's still there." The audience fell silent. Some people wiped their eyes. Daniel continued, "The chandelier broke that night, but it showed me something. We all break sometimes, but if we have kindness around us, we can still shine." He ended his speech with a shy smile. "So this light we fixed, it's not just a lamp. It's a reminder that forgiveness builds more than fear ever can." When he stepped down, the entire room stood in applause. Keanu didn't move at first. He just smiled, proud and quiet. Sandra leaned closer and whispered, "That's your doing." He shook his head. "No," he said. "That's kindness doing what it always does, growing when it's shared." Outside, as the evening sun set over the city, reporters gathered again, hoping to get a quote from Keanu or Sandra. Both slipped away quietly through a side exit, walking under the soft orange light of dusk. "You know," Sandra said, "most people think Halloween is about masks and pretending, but last week showed the opposite. It showed who people really are when the masks fall." Keanu nodded. "It showed that even in darkness, someone always chooses light," he said. They walked for a while in comfortable silence. The streets were calm, and the wind carried faint sounds of laughter from a nearby park. Finally, Sandra spoke again. "You turned a dark night into something unforgettable," she said. Keanu looked ahead and replied softly, "It wasn't me. It was what we all became when fear knocked. Human." As the last bit of sunlight disappeared, he looked up at the sky and whispered something only Sandra heard. "The world remembers heroes," he said, "but I hope it never forgets the power of mercy." And for the first time in many years, Sandra felt something rare. The kind of peace that comes when you witness kindness not just once, but in every choice that follows it. Weeks passed, but the story of that Halloween night refused to fade. Across the world, people kept sharing it, not because it involved two famous stars, but because it revealed something deeper about humanity. Children wrote letters to the charity, thanking Keanu and Sandra for teaching them what real courage looked like. Some called it the nightlight won over fear. Keanu avoided the spotlight as always. He returned to his quiet routine, filming in the mornings and helping community shelters at night. But something inside him had changed. Every time he saw a chandelier, every time he heard a story of someone getting a second chance, he thought of Daniel, the boy who had nearly given up on himself and then learned what kindness could rebuild. One evening, Sandra visited his small studio to deliver a framed photo from the charity event. It showed the repaired chandelier, shining perfectly again. Below it was a small plaque engraved with the words, "Even broken lights can shine again." She handed it to him and said softly, "They hung this in the children's hospital lobby. I thought you'd like one too." He took the frame carefully, his eyes lingering on the reflection of the chandelier. "It's beautiful," he said. "Not because it's perfect, but because it's whole again." They sat together, drinking tea, the quiet between them filled with gentle comfort. Sandra looked around and smiled. "You know, everyone keeps saying you saved me," she said. "But I think you saved all of us that night, even the ones who weren't there." Keanu smiled faintly. "Saving isn't about catching someone," he said. "It's about reminding them they can stand again." Outside, rain began to fall lightly, the same way it had that night at the mansion. The sound brought back memories. The panic, the fall, the silence after. Sandra took a deep breath. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been there?" she asked quietly. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I think life puts us where we're needed, even when we don't understand why." Just then, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Daniel. He had been accepted into a design scholarship program using the funds Keanu had arranged. The message read, "I will use light to help hospitals save energy and children's rooms feel safe. You taught me what true light means." Keanu read the message aloud, and Sandra's eyes softened. "He really did change," she said, "because you believed in him." Keanu smiled quietly. "Because he finally believed in himself," he corrected. Later that night, the two visited the hospital together. The administrators had invited them to attend a small ceremony, the official unveiling of a new children's ward built from the fundraiser's donations. The ward was called the Kindness Wing. The hallway walls were painted in soft shades of yellow and white, filled with drawings made by children who had recovered there. Each room had a quote written above the door. One said, "Kindness is the safest place in the world." Another said, "Courage begins when fear meets love." As they walked through, the children ran up to thank them, offering hand-drawn cards with tiny hearts and stars. Sandra knelt beside one little girl who handed her a drawing of a chandelier with wings. "This is beautiful," Sandra said warmly. The girl grinned. "Mommy said angels save people, so I gave the chandelier wings." Keanu knelt beside them and asked gently, "And what does the light mean?" The girl smiled shyly. It means we're safe now. For a moment, both adults were silent. The simplicity of that answer touched something deep within them, Sandra whispered. See, this is why the story mattered. Keanu nodded slowly. Because light can travel farther than we think. Before leaving, the hospital director presented them with a small metal charm in the shape of a lantern. This was designed by Daniel, she said. It symbolizes light passed from one person to another. He said he learned that kindness isn't a spotlight. It's a chain reaction. Sandra held the charm carefully. He's right, she said softly. And it all started on a night we thought would end in fear. Outside, as they walked back to their car under the calm evening sky, the city lights shimmered like thousands of small chandeliers above them. Sandra looked at Keanu and said, You know, I've seen you act in so many films, but the way you live your kindness, that's the real story. Keanu smiled gently. Stories are only good when they make people believe in something better, he said. If this one made even one person kinder, it was worth every second. As they reached the parking lot, Sandra paused and looked up. The moon hung high, glowing through soft clouds. Funny how Halloween started with masks, she said, but ended by showing who everyone really was. Keanu looked at her, his voice calm and full of warmth. Maybe that's what kindness does, he said. It removes masks, not to expose people, but to free them. She smiled, feeling her eyes sting with quiet emotion. And maybe that's what real heroes do too, she whispered. Keanu looked away toward the horizon, where the city shimmered like endless reflections of light. Real heroes, he said softly, are the ones who choose compassion even when no one sees. They stood in silence for a moment, the cool breeze wrapping around them, carrying the soft echo of children's laughter from the hospital behind. Sandra finally whispered, The night took a dark turn. Keanu finished her sentence with a calm smile. And kindness turned it back to light. And so, the story that began with fear ended with grace, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, one act of courage and compassion can light 1,000 hearts.